You know, of all the parts on this build, the one I'm the most excited about is the one I'm getting ready to start right now, and that's the roll bar. This is, of all the custom parts of this project, it's the one I've probably put the most thought into. It's the most prolific change to the exterior of the car, that's for sure, and that's probably why I've put so much thought into it. But mechanically, it's a bit of a challenge. I had to tie it into the chassis. I'll nip this one right in the bud right now. I'm probably safe in saying that any departure from the hoops that are standard in these cars is probably a move in the wrong direction from a safety standpoint. My thoughts are, and I'm sure this probably invites all sorts of controversy, but my thoughts are that if you're rolling one of these things and you're not wearing a helmet, you're probably not going to have a great day. So a variation in the roll bar, I think is going to be okay in this case, but it's also going to incorporate a third tail light and potentially, and I'm still kind of working this out, but it might also support a kind of T-top style roof. I'm going to build a provision into it that would allow me to do that in the future. It might not be a part of the first round, maybe the second round of this build. But let's get going. It's going to involve some kind of basic metal fabrication, a little bit of tube bending, a lot of welding, and some sheet metal work. I'm actually going to encapsulate the structure in sheet metal and make it kind of a uniform and very clean and simple design. So let's get going. I'm sacrificing the old roll bar, or actually I say the roll bar that came with the car. And I'm going to use this as material to build my new roll bar in terms of the way it mounts to the chassis at least. So I've got to cut a section out of this, got to notch it, and we'll see how this goes. Yeah, I thought I'd give you a little tour of the parts that I'm making. These are going to connect my roll bar to the Factory 5 roll bar connector. They're going to sleeve on and then clamp in place, but basically you can see the support there. Try to keep it in frame, sorry about that. And then this clamps in place like this. I will show it in the car shortly. I'm gonna finish welding these pieces together, and then I'll show you what the test fit looks like in the car. Well, I finished the brackets that mount the roll bar to the chassis. I'm utilizing existing points on the chassis. You can tell those two sections there, the existing factory 5 tube will fit right into that opening, and then I clamp them down. The tube does extend into the welded portion of the body. The clamp really is just to hold them in place once they're locked down. The 2 units in the back with the bolts, there's a nut welded on the interior, and those support the rear portion of the roll bar. It's gonna have 4 mounts, obviously, and I'm going to show you what they look like installed in this next clip. So here we have the location of the roll bar mounting points. I'm going to see if I can get this camera positioned in such a way that there's still some lighting there. Oh, that looks like it works pretty well. Let's see if this works. So this mounts to the top of the post. There's a bolt that goes in. I do have space for the shock to mount, so that bolts in there like this. And then this piece drops over the top, slides down in place, locks in place that way, and then this provides additional structure and bolts it in place. And that gives me my 2 driver side mounting points for the roll bar. which you will start to see fabricated coming up soon. This is where we start. We start with 1-inch DOM tubing, 1/8-inch wall, putting it through my my little roller here, my bender. You can tell it's a very manual. You can work up a sweat using this machine. There's no preset to it or anything. You just kind of run it through until you hit that radius you want. And you can see I'm using a paper template here to match that radius or to get to that radius. So you kind of go back and forth on it until you hit that. And hit it, I think, probably six or seven times, so it went pretty quickly. So a funny thing about this radius, this is the radius I came up, I basically developed this radius. It wasn't a measurement off of anything specific. If you look at the top of the windshield is actually flat. I want the roll bar to match the profile of the windshield. However, if you did that exactly, you'd end up with a flat top roll bar and it wouldn't look correct. In part because that windshield's got the windshield cants back a bit, has a rear kind of rake to it. And as soon as that windshield tips back, you then start to see the radius of the glass. And then that radius becomes apparent. So to generate this, I actually used a shadow. I had a bright light. I temporarily mocked up the windshield at its appropriate angle, shined a flashlight across it, displayed it on this pattern that was held vertically, and traced it. So this is a created radius based purely on what looks good visually and what matches the windshield. So I just rolled the 1-inch tubing to match that radius, and matches perfectly. Rolled them both at the same position so they came out exactly the same. This is the very first step in this roll bar fabrication.
You're so good, but not for me. Don't try to be the person you'll never be. Can't say we're different, but it's not a secret. Every time I see you, I wanna say, I don't want to love you, don't want to fight, I don't want to talk all night. Please, please forget my number. I wish I were louder on that love. Ooh, you're so good. Every day I hear the words all from you. Ooh, you're so good. Maybe I could say it, but that's not true. You're so different, but it's not a secret. Every time I see you, I wanna say, can't say we're different, but it's not a secret. Every time I see you, I wanna say, I don't want to love you, don't want to fight, I don't want to talk all night. Please, please forget my number. I wish I were louder on that love. I don't want to love you, don't want to fight, I don't want to talk all night.
So here's the first rough layout on my template. That essentially is the shape of the roll bar, at least one half of it. That makes up the internal frame of the roll bar. I'm going to tack weld a few of these joints and then rough fit it in the car and make my adjustments. we go for the second half to this roll. Ooh, a little hot. Still a little warm. Second half of this roll bar. These two have to line up. It's kind of a funky angle. So far so good. There's going to be one that's going to give me a problem. It's going to be this one. So you can kind of see what's going on here. This is just the inside of this roll bar. This is going to be, there's going to be some structure added between these members, and then the whole thing is skinned in 16 gauge. So not only is there a rake this way, makes sense because it mimics the stock roll bar to have it kind of leaning back, but if you notice, these two legs are different heights, and that's to kick this back up. I didn't want the whole roll bar leaning down. This is going to be a flat surface, so I wanted this coplanar with the surface of the road. And a little high school geometry went a long way. One of the challenges with this roll bar and skinning it with 16 gauge steel, and I knew this going into it, is because that top radius where it meets that downturned leg, the legs are not the same length, so you couldn't do a square cut on that piece of sheet metal and just bend it over the surface. You had to make it really in 4, actually 6 different separate pieces, and then shape each one individually, and then tack them in place and then weld them together. Worked out great, but definitely a little more work than I'd planned. Yeah, the next step, as I'm finishing up this roll bar, the tack welding the sheet metal in place, the next step is to build the third taillight, which is the other purpose behind this roll bar, is to give me a nice solid place and very visible place to mount that third taillight. You'll see in the fabrication of this, I had to cut some tubing to use in order to kind of make this thing die into the roll bar. I wanted to make it look like it was all one piece, very intentional in design and not something that was bolted on. So the end result is it is part of the roll bar in every way. It's welded in, and it will house 7 fairly bright lights, and you'll see those go together shortly. After the taillight was welded in place, I moved on to the third and fourth rear legs of the roll bar mounting point. I decided to mount studs in this, thinking that the whole roll bar has to drop in after the body's in place. So I figured the studs would allow me to drop this in and kind of pivot the whole thing into place. So this is what the semi-finished rear connection point on the roll bar looks like. Got my stud welded in there, and now I'm tuning up the fish mouth. Hey, if my wife is listening right now, I would love a tube notcher. This old school approach is for the birds. I started with the die grinder, getting the shape roughed out. It's something you gotta sneak up on. Something you gotta sneak up on anyways to get the fit right, especially when the other point's a fixed point in the chassis, and sneaking up on the way this meets with the roll bar is a little tricky. But man, a tubing notcher would have been nice. So my wife, or Santa, if you're listening. Quite a bit of time spent filing, getting it just right. I'm going to make sure that the welds are going to be clean and easy, and make sure the bar is not under tension at any one point, because this thing has to drop in. This thing has to drop in as a complete assembly after the body's in place. And the only way that's going to work is if I'm not having to stress any of the 4 points. So, sorry, you're going to watch a little filing for a little bit, and and then hopefully some welding and a completed roll bar. Stay tuned. So my friends and family will attest to this, but I'm a guy that can't stand rattles, squeaks, anything like that in a car or anything. It drives me crazy. I'll pull over and chase them down for hours. So of all the people for this to happen to, I don't know if you can hear it or not, but so there is something inside my roll bar that I've welded inside that is not coming out. It will probably rattle and drive me crazy. I suspect it is a piece of welding rod. So I think what I'm going to do to fix that is I'll kind of pour it down to one side and get it to settle where I kind of know it is, and then drill a tiny little hole and put in a little expanding foam insulation, a polyurethane expanding foam insulation, and hopefully it'll encapsulate whatever that is to get rid of the rattle. Otherwise, there might be a Factory 5 Roadster for sale right after I'm done, because things like this drive me crazy. So just thought I'd give you a little update on that. Yeah, welcome to some uncharted territory. This is new. I'm gonna do some Bondo filler to fill in all the stitched welds. Didn't want to do a continuous weld. I think I'd be grinding forever, and I suspect I'd get a little bit too much deformation in the roll bar to have it fit correctly after I'm done. Plus it doesn't need it structurally, that's for sure. But I have not done a lot of body work. Patches here and there, that's about it. Done fiberglass work, but not body work. This is going to be a painted finish, so it's going to need to be perfect. Now we got a pretty exciting moment here. I've got the roll bar in place, bolted in, and kind of did my first test fit after I did all the sheet metal tweaking on the frame itself, roll bar frame, and also filled in some of the gaps. So it was a stitch, as you saw earlier, it was a stitch welded. The sheet metal was stitch welded onto the frame, so that left some gaps to be filled. I didn't want to run a continuous weld because that likely would have twisted it. It would have heated it up too much, and it probably wouldn't have fit. So stitch weld's all that was needed anyways. So that did leave some filling, so I filled those in, did a little sanding, a little filling, a little sanding, a little filling, a little sanding, back and forth. And then I just sprayed a light coat of gray primer on it to give me reference for some additional sanding. Although I think as I see it, I'm probably close enough, and I'll probably finish the rest of that when I do the rest of the body work. But let's take a look at where I'm at now. I'm super happy about it. It's exactly what I was looking for, and I realize it'll probably be a little polarizing with those out there that are purists. I know I've said stuff like this before. But it is exactly what I wanted. And as you'll see, it houses the third tail light nicely. So here's where we're at. So here's the finished roll bar. Well, finished as much as it's going to be before it gets paint. Sorry about the sunlight here. I'm having a tough time. There we go. That's a little bit better. Bolts firmly in place. It's rock solid. Again, this gray is just a quick light spray of a primer that'll give me, what's that guide coat, I think they call it. But there's the third tail light section. That's all ground into place and smooth. Transitions are all nice and smooth. I have, let's see, 7 very, very bright LED bulbs that snap into there. They sit inside that bezel, so that bezel recesses the lights. And so the additional supports there. I had the windshield in there mocked in, and I'm really happy with the sight line across the top of the windshield to the roll bar. I think I mentioned this before, but one of the difficulties is there was a little bit of challenge from a geometry standpoint here. As you can see, I don't know if it's going to show up in this, but so the top of this roll bar is parallel to the ground and does not follow the curve of the car. So if I'm probably not doing a great job, in fact, I know I'm not doing a great job explaining that, but you can see as I step back here, the roll bar actually follows the ground and not its rake back. So if I had simply raked the whole thing back, this would have had an angle like that, which I think would have looked a little funky. So I kept the angle flat here, and roll bar still has that kind of rake back. So yeah, I am beyond happy, and may have had a delicious local IPA at the finish of this one. So next step, I'm gonna start to I think probably get back to some of the other interior work before I take the body off again. You can see I'm working on some other things over there, dash, a couple other parts. I'm gonna try to get those integrated, finish integrating those in before I pull the body off. It's actually not a big deal to pull the body on and off, so I suspect that'll happen quite a few more times. So one quick look again, try to find that money shot that we always shoot for, right? Of course, there's not one here with nothing on it, but that's how the roll bar looks. Next step, I will get into things like the dash and a few of the other parts. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching.